A stranger walked into my anniversary dinner with papers, photos, and a ring, claiming my husband was hers first. Everyone believed her. Until I remembered one private truth about our marriage that she could never fake. My name is Everly Voss Calder, and on the night my husband and I were supposed to celebrate 5 years of marriage, a woman walked into a crowded charity dinner and told everyone our marriage was fake. She had courthouse papers, old photos, hotel receipts, printed messages, and a gold ring with my husband's initials engraved inside it. For a few minutes, the entire room looked at me like I was not his wife, but some foolish woman who had been living inside another woman's life. My husband stood beside me, pale and shaking, saying he had never seen her before. Almost nobody believed him. But there was one thing that woman did not know. A marriage is not only proved by paper, it is proved by memory, by habit, by private language, by quiet loyalty, and by the small truths two people build when no one else is watching. And when I finally asked her one question only a real wife could answer, her perfect lie began to fall apart in front of everyone who had believed it. Before we begin, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and means a lot. Now, let's start. The Bellwether House stood near the river in Savannah, Georgia, with white columns, old brick steps, tall windows, and a wraparound porch that looked beautiful under warm evening lights. Years ago, it had been a family mansion. Then it became a bank office. Then an empty building with cracked plaster, damaged floors, and broken shutters. My husband, Callum Greer Calder, restored it with his own hands and his own stubborn patience. That was the kind of man he was. He did not throw something away just because it was damaged. He studied it. He respected it. He found the original strength underneath the broken parts and brought it back. That night, the place was full of donors, local business owners, family friends, city people, charity board members, and relatives who always smiled more when cameras were nearby. The dinner was officially for a children's shelter fund, but everyone in that room knew it was also something more. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. And after dessert, Callum was going to be announced as the majority owner of Calder and Beam Restoration, the company his late father had built from nothing. For 5 years, I had lived under the quiet pressure of the Calder name. People saw the restored houses, the company trucks, the family trust, the lake property, the charity dinners, and they decided I had married into a life I did not deserve. They did not see the early mornings when Callum and I shared gas station coffee, because payroll had to come first. They did not see him coming home with sawdust in his hair and pain in his shoulder, still asking whether I had eaten. They did not see me driving 2 hours to find old brass handles for a client who could not afford new ones. They did not see us paying bills late, fixing mistakes, holding each other through grief, and building a marriage inside ordinary days. But Callum's stepmother, Leora Pennock Calder, saw enough to hate me. She never screamed. She was too elegant for that. Leora used soft words with sharp edges. Everly, that dress is brave. Everly, you are learning our family culture slowly. Everly, rooms like this must feel overwhelming for someone with your background. Every sentence came wrapped in manners, but every sentence reminded me I was not born into her world. Leora never wanted Callum to marry me. She wanted him attached to a richer family, a cleaner circle, a woman she could guide like furniture in a room. She smiled at me in public, touched my shoulder for photographs, praised my little design business, and then privately acted as if my marriage was a temporary inconvenience. But tonight was supposed to end her quiet control. Callum's father had left a very clear trust clause. If Callum remained legally married for 5 full years and kept the company stable, majority control would pass to him after the anniversary date. Midnight would make it final. Leora had spent years acting like she was protecting the family business, but everyone close to the company knew the truth. She was protecting her influence. That evening, I tried not to stare at the clock, but my heart knew every minute. Callum stood beside me in a dark suit, his hand resting gently at the small of my back. He leaned down and whispered, "After tonight, we disappear for 2 days." I smiled and asked, "Where?" He looked serious for a moment, then said, "Somewhere with terrible phone service and pancakes bigger than my face." I laughed, and for one clean second, the whole evening felt safe. Then the front doors opened, and the room changed before I understood why. A woman stood at the entrance wearing a cream coat over a fitted black dress. She was polished, calm, and completely prepared. Her hair was smooth, her makeup perfect, and in one hand she held a dark leather folder. 2 servers paused near the doorway. A councilman turned his head, then another guest, then another. Silence spread slowly, like ink in water. The woman's eyes moved across the dining room until they found Callum. She smiled at him as if she had loved him for years. Then she began walking toward us, slow and steady, as if every step had been rehearsed. Callum's hand stiffened against my back. I looked at him, waiting for recognition, or guilt, or confusion. What I saw was pure shock. The woman stopped near our table and said, "Callum, sweetheart, did you really think you could celebrate a marriage that was never legal?" The words landed so cleanly that, for a second, nobody reacted. Then the whispers began. Callum stepped forward. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" His voice was careful, but I heard the tremor inside it. The woman gave a soft, wounded laugh and turned toward me. "You must be Everly." She said my name with pity, like she had practiced it in a mirror. "I am sorry you had to learn this in front of everyone, but I was his wife first." The room erupted into shocked murmurs. My chest tightened so hard I almost could not breathe. Callum said, "No, absolutely not. I don't know you." But the woman opened her folder and began placing papers on the table. "My name is Brenna Vale Hartwick," she said loudly. "Callum and I were married in Beaufort County 6 months before he married you. He left me, erased me, and built a new life on top of a lie." She held up a marriage certificate, then spread out photographs of herself standing beside Callum at what looked like a coastal resort. In one photo, his arm seemed to be around her waist. In another, they were smiling near a hotel balcony. Then came printed messages, a hotel receipt, an affidavit, and finally a gold ring. She lifted it between 2 fingers and said, "He gave me this. Inside it says CGC, always." People stood from their chairs to see. A woman near the fireplace whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else said, "If this is real, what happens to the trust?" That sentence cut through the noise, and I saw Leora lower her eyes quickly, but not before I caught something on her face. Not surprise. Calculation. Callum kept shaking his head. "Everly, look at me. I have never seen this woman before in my life." His voice was desperate, but desperation can look like guilt when people already want a scandal. Brenna wiped a tear from her cheek with perfect timing. "I did not want to do this publicly," she said. "I waited for years. He promised he would fix it. But tonight, when I heard he was being rewarded for a lie, I could not stay silent." The room leaned toward her. That was the danger of a beautiful lie. It does not need to be true at first. It only needs to be emotional enough for people to stop thinking. Leora moved toward me slowly, her face full of elegant concern. She placed a cold hand on my arm. "Everly," she said softly, "perhaps you should step away before this becomes uglier. No one will blame you for needing privacy." Her words sounded gentle, but I understood them immediately. She was not protecting me. She was trying to move me out of the center of my own life. She wanted me to leave the room looking broken, while she stayed behind to manage the family crisis. For a few minutes, I nearly fell into the lie with everyone else. That is the part I hate admitting, but it is true. The papers looked official. The photos looked real. The messages looked painful. The ring looked expensive. My mind ran through 5 years of marriage, looking for a hidden crack I had missed. Had Callum traveled without telling me? Had there been some forgotten woman from before me? Had I loved a man who knew how to lie softly? Pain can make even a loyal heart shake. Then I looked at Callum again, not at the papers, not at Brenna, not at Leora. Him. His eyes were wet, but there was no guilt in them. There was fear. Yes, but it was not the fear of a man being exposed. It was the fear of a man watching his wife being pulled away from him by strangers, and suddenly, a memory came back so clearly that I almost heard the rain from that night. 3 years earlier, Callum was restoring an old blue house on Habersham Street after a storm damaged the roof. The owner did not have money for extra repairs, so Callum stayed late with a flashlight and a tarp, trying to save the original walls. I found him writing something on the inside of a wall stud before the drywall went up. When I asked what he was doing, he smiled shyly and said, "My father taught me to leave one sentence inside every house. Nobody sees it, but the house knows." The sentence was simple. "Leave it stronger than you found it." Later, when we bought our small home, he wrote the same words inside our kitchen wall. Under them, he wrote, "Everly made me stronger." I had never told anyone about that. Not Leora, not friends, not even my sister. It was ours. I took a deep breath, and that breath changed me. I was still hurt. I was still shaking inside. But I was no longer lost. I stepped away from Leora's hand and said, "Enough." My voice was not loud, but it carried because I had been silent too long. The room turned toward me. I looked at Callum first. For a second, no one else existed. "I believe my husband," I said. His face broke with relief and tears slipped down his cheeks. Leora's mouth tightened. Brenna's expression changed just slightly, but I saw it. She had not expected that. She had prepared for tears, anger, collapse, maybe even a public fight. She had not prepared for calm trust. Brenna lifted the certificate again. "Belief does not change law." I nodded. "No, but truth changes everything." I walked closer to her. "You said you were married to Callum. You said you shared a life with him. So answer one question." She straightened her shoulders. "Ask anything." I looked directly into her eyes. "When Callum restores a house, what does he write on the inside wall before the drywall closes?" Her confidence flickered. It was small, but the room was watching now, and small things become large under pressure. "What kind of question is that?" she asked. "A simple one," I said. "A real wife would know. A woman who lived with him would know." She forced a smile. "He signs his initials." I looked at the ring in her hand, then back at her. "No. He never hides his name inside a wall. He writes his father's sentence." A man from Callum's crew stepped forward from the back. His name was Mercer, and he had worked with the Calder family since before Callum was old enough to hold a hammer properly. "That's true," Mercer said quietly. "Old Mr. Calder wrote it in every house. Callum kept doing it." The room shifted. It was not belief yet, but doubt had entered, and doubt is dangerous to a lie that has been standing too straight. Brenna's smile tightened. "That proves nothing. Maybe he never told me." "Maybe," I said. "Then answer this. Which hand does he use when he writes it?" Brenna swallowed. "His right." Mercer shook his head. "Callum writes left-handed. Always has. Old injury in the right wrist." A quiet sound moved through the room. I looked at Brenna and said, "You brought papers, photos, and a ring, but you forgot to bring a life." Her face went pale. Leora spoke quickly. "Personal details do not erase legal evidence." I turned toward her. "You're right, so let's look at the legal evidence." I picked up the marriage certificate and forced myself to read it slowly. The date, the county, the seal, the full name. Then I saw it. The certificate listed him as Callum Greer Calder. To everyone else, that looked correct. But it was wrong. On the date printed on that document, Callum had not legally restored the Calder surname yet. After his father died, he spent nearly a year still using the surname Vale because the legal name restoration took time. I had been there when the judge finally approved it. I remembered Callum crying in the parking lot afterward because he said it felt like bringing his father home. I held up the paper. "This certificate says Callum Greer Calder married you in April, but in April, that legal name did not exist. His name change was not approved until November. Whoever made this paper knew who he is now, but not who he legally was then." The room became silent again. "That is not a courthouse mistake," I said. "That is a forger's mistake." Brenna reached for the paper, but I pulled it back. Callum stepped beside me, and this time no one stopped him. I asked the event coordinator to find Holland Pierce, the family trust attorney. He was already at the dinner because he was supposed to witness the ownership transfer announcement. Holland came forward, adjusted his glasses, and studied the document with a serious face. He did not speak for almost a full minute. Then he said, "This seal is also wrong." Brenna whispered, "No, it isn't." Holland looked at her. "Beaufort County stopped using this filing style before the date listed here. I cannot make a final legal determination at a dinner table, but this document has multiple irregularities." The guests who had judged Callum now began looking at Brenna differently. It happened face by face. Sympathy turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into discomfort. Discomfort turned into shame. Callum picked up the hotel receipt and stared at it. "The Harbor Slate Inn," he said slowly. "Interesting choice." Brenna said nothing. Callum turned the receipt toward Holland. "This says I stayed there with her for 2 nights in August, but that hotel was closed that entire summer after a kitchen fire. My company repaired the roof. Nobody stayed there." Mercer nodded from the back. "That's true. Place smelled like smoke until September. We had the keys." Another crack opened. Another piece of the lie broke loose. I picked up the ring next. It was beautiful and cold, engraved with CGC. Always. For one painful second, I understood why people had believed it. Rings feel personal, but I knew Callum hated using his middle initial because Greer came from Leora's family side, a name she had pushed onto him when he was young. He never used it on gifts, notes, or anything intimate. On our first anniversary, he gave me a silver band with only one word inside. Still. I held up Brenna's ring. "Whoever bought this knew his formal initials," I said. "But they did not know his heart." Brenna's eyes filled with real fear now. Not the beautiful tears from before. Real fear. Her hands shook around the folder. "I didn't make the papers," she whispered. The room froze. "I didn't make them," she repeated. "I was hired." Leora made a small sound, almost like a sigh. "This is absurd." But Brenna looked toward Leora's voice and then quickly looked away. That tiny movement told me more than any confession. Fear has direction. Brenna was afraid of Leora. Callum saw it too. His jaw tightened. "Who hired you?" he asked. Brenna shook her head. "I can't." I stepped closer. "You walked into my anniversary dinner, called my marriage fake, accused my husband, and tried to destroy his name in front of trustees and donors. You can speak now, or you can explain it to police with an attorney standing over you." Brenna covered her face. "I needed money!" she cried. "My mother's care facility was going to remove her. I was behind on everything. Someone contacted me through a private account. They said you were a gold digger. They said Callum was weak and trapped. They told me this would only stop a fraud." "Who contacted you?" I asked. She shook her head again. "The emails came from Pennick Events Consulting." The name moved through the room like a match touching dry grass. Pennick was Leora's maiden name. Leora straightened at once. "Half the city knows my family name. That proves nothing." "Maybe not," I said. "But it explains the timing." I looked at Holland. "If this lie had worked tonight, what would happen to the trust transfer?" Holland's answer was careful. "A credible marriage fraud allegation could have delayed the transfer until review." Leora spoke too quickly. "Exactly. That is why everything must pause immediately." And there it was. The whole plan exposed by her own urgency. She did not need Brenna to win forever. She only needed the room uncertain before midnight. If our marriage looked invalid, Leora could challenge the trust, freeze the company transfer, push me out, weaken Callum, and take temporary control again. The dinner ended without dessert. People left in quiet groups, carrying their shame with them. Some apologized to Callum. Some avoided our eyes because an apology would have required admitting how quickly they had believed the worst. Brenna was taken into a private sitting room with Holland, 2 security officers, and a local police sergeant who had been attending as a guest. She gave a partial statement. She admitted she was paid to appear, show the papers, cry, and leave once the room turned against us. She still refused to name Leora directly, but she gave enough details to make the air in that room heavier. Leora left early, claiming she was too humiliated by family chaos to stay. I watched her walk down the front steps of the Bellwether house with her back straight and her silver hair shining under the lamps. She did not look defeated. She looked delayed. At home, Callum and I sat at our kitchen table without turning on the bright lights. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the soft sound of rain against the windows. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Callum said, "You believe me?" His voice was almost childlike with exhaustion. I looked at him across the table. I almost didn't. Pain moved through his eyes, but he nodded. "I understand." I shook my head. "No, I almost let a stranger's paper become bigger than our life. That scares me." He reached across the table and took my hand. "You came back." I swallowed hard. "Because I remembered the wall." He closed his eyes. My father's sentence. "No," I said softly. "The one under it." He opened his eyes then, and I saw the moment he remembered what he had written inside our kitchen wall. Everly made me stronger. The next morning, the real work began. I did not want revenge that looked like screaming. I wanted proof. Callum pulled company records from the Harbor Slate-In project and found work logs proving he had been supervising repairs on the exact dates that receipt claimed he was staying there as a guest. Holland filed a notice with the trustees that the attempted challenge appeared to be based on compromised documents. I called Tamsin Bell, a retired courthouse clerk whose old Victorian porch I had restored 2 years earlier. Tamsin was sharp, impatient, and allergic to nonsense. When I sent her a photo of the certificate seal, she called me back in 3 minutes and said, "Honey, that seal is older than my second husband's excuses." She explained that the document number did not match the filing sequence, and the seal format had been retired before the listed date. By noon, she had connected us with a former record supervisor who confirmed that there was no valid marriage record for Callum and Brenna in Beaufort County. Every lie had a seam. We only had to pull carefully. The biggest break came that evening from someone I had never met. A message arrived through my business website from a man named Nico Alder. The subject line said, "Ask Leora about Panic Events." Nico wrote that he had worked as a temporary assistant in Leora's charity office for 7 months. He had saved emails and payment records after she fired him and blamed him for missing funds. "I don't know what happened at the dinner," he wrote, "but if Brenna Hartwick was involved, you need to see this." We met him the next morning at a small coffee shop near Forsyth Park. Nico looked tired and nervous, but anger kept him steady. He showed us emails from Panic Events Consulting to Brenna using coded language. Appearance fee, document packet, emotional credibility, bonus upon successful delay. One email mentioned the anniversary deadline. Another said, "LP wants the room uncertain before the transfer." LP Leora Pennick. Nico also had a payment record from a charity vendor account to Brenna's cousin. Then he showed us the part that made Callum go completely still. It was a memo from Leora to a private developer discussing the possible sale of the Calder Lake property if transitional authority returned to her. That phrase sounded clean, but it meant something ugly. If she could freeze the transfer and regain temporary control, she planned to sell the land Callum's father had protected for years. It was the land where Callum had learned to frame a wall, where his father taught him to measure twice, cut once, and never hide bad work behind paint. Callum stood up and walked outside. I followed him under a live oak tree. He stared at the street for a long moment. "She knew what that land meant," he said. "She knew exactly." I touched his arm. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. I kept thinking patience would make her decent. His voice turned quiet and hard. "I'm done being patient with someone who calls control family." Holland moved quickly. 3 days later, he called an emergency trustee meeting at the Bellwether house. the same place where Leora had tried to destroy us. That was not my idea, but I respected the justice of it. The room would remember. This time there were no flowers, no music, no dessert plates, and no warm charity lighting. Only a long table, water bottles, folders, trustees, 2 shelter board members, Holland, Callum, me, Nico, Tamsin, and Leora. Brenna was not there, but her signed statement was. She had admitted she never met Callum before the dinner. She admitted the documents were given to her in a sealed packet. She admitted she was told to avoid personal questions and focus on emotional pressure. She admitted she had been promised extra money if the trust transfer was delayed. Reading those words made my stomach tighten, not because they surprised me, but because I remembered how close the room had come to believing all of it. Leora arrived in a navy suit with a pearl pin and the same controlled face she had worn for years. She sat at the far end of the table and looked at me like I was a stain on her favorite tablecloth. "This is a desperate attempt to save face after a public embarrassment," she said. "I did not hire that woman. I did not forge anything. And frankly, I find it disturbing that Everly is being allowed to influence family business while emotions are high." There it was again. Everly is emotional. Everly is outside. Everly does not belong. For 5 years, those messages had been dressed in silk. Now they were sitting naked on the table. I did not argue. I opened my folder and said, "I am not influencing anything. I am presenting a sequence." My voice was calm, and this time, calm felt stronger than anger. I placed the documents on the table one by one. First, the marriage certificate used a legal name Callum did not have at the time. Second, the courthouse seal and document number were wrong. Third, the hotel receipt named a property closed for renovation. Fourth, the ring used formal initials Callum never used personally. Fifth, Brenna received instructions and payment through Pennick Events Consulting. Sixth, those emails referenced the anniversary deadline and a successful delay. Seventh, if the transfer had been frozen, Leora had already discussed selling the lake property. The trustees read in silence. Leora's face stayed still, but her fingers tightened around her purse. One shelter board member, a woman with silver glasses and no patience for performance, looked at her with disgust. "You used a children's shelter vendor account for this?" Leora snapped. "Nothing was taken from children." The woman replied, "You used their structure to hide a personal attack. Do not polish it." Holland adjusted his glasses and spoke clearly. "The marriage between Callum and Everly Calder is valid. The attempted challenge was unsupported and appears fraudulent. The ownership transfer became effective at midnight after their 5th anniversary. Mrs. Leora Calder has no transitional authority." He placed one final document on the table. "I also recommend immediate suspension of Mrs. Calder from all company advisory roles and from shelter donor management pending formal audit." Leora stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You cannot do this." Callum looked at her, and his voice was quiet but final. "It's already done." She pointed at me. "She turned you against your family." Callum's face hardened. "No, you tried to turn a room against my wife. There is a difference." Leora opened her mouth, but no perfect sentence came out. The woman who had controlled rooms for years had finally lost one. I looked at Leora, expecting anger to burn through me, but what I felt was colder and cleaner than anger, freedom. "You tried to prove my marriage was fake," I said. "Instead, you proved your entire life was built on control." The words settled over the table. Leora stared at me with hatred so pure it almost looked honest. Then the shelter board voted to suspend her pending audit. The trustees confirmed Callum's authority. Holland notified her that all vendor accounts connected to her would be reviewed. In less than one meeting, she lost her influence over the company, her position in the charity circle, her chance to sell the lake property, and the power she had used for years to make me feel small. She gathered her purse and walked out with her head high. But this time, no one followed her. Real justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is just the sound of a door closing behind someone who should have left long ago. After the meeting, Callum and I stood alone near the old fireplace at the Bellwether house. It was the same room where Brenna had placed the fake papers on the table. The same room where people had doubted him. The same room where Leora had tried to erase me with a soft voice and a cold hand. Callum looked around and said, "I keep thinking about how fast they believed it." I nodded. People believe paper when they do not know the life behind it. He turned to me. "You knew." "I knew enough to ask," I said. He gave me a tired smile. "That question saved me." I shook my head. "No. The life you lived saved you. The question only opened the door." A week later, Callum took me to the first small house we had restored together after our wedding. It was a cream-colored cottage outside Savannah with blue shutters and a crooked porch we had painted ourselves. The house was empty, waiting for new owners, and Callum had permission to check something in the attic wall before the closing. He removed a small wooden panel near the roofline, and dust floated in the afternoon light. Inside, on an old wall stud, I saw his handwriting from years ago. "Leave it stronger than you found it." Under that, in smaller letters, he had written, "Everly made me stronger." I covered my mouth, and for a moment all the noise from that terrible night disappeared. The fake certificate, the ring, the photographs, the whispers, Leora's cold smile, Brenna's shaking confession, the boardroom, the legal papers, everything fell away. This was the truth no one could forge, a sentence hidden inside a wall, a promise nobody clapped for, a marriage written into quiet wood before the world ever questioned it. Callum stood behind me and placed his hands gently on my shoulders. "I wrote that before the trust," he said. "Before the transfer. Before any of them decided what you were worth." His voice broke. I knew then. I turned and hugged him in that dusty attic with sunlight coming through the roof vent and the old house creaking around us. We had not escaped pain. We had walked through it. There is a difference. Pain leaves marks, but it also reveals structure, the way a storm shows which beams were strong all along. Leora had tried to steal my marriage in front of everyone. She used forged papers, public shame, family pressure, and a desperate woman willing to perform a lie. She thought if enough people doubted Callum, I would let go of his hand. She thought if enough people looked at me like an outsider, I would become one. But she forgot something people like her always forget. A real marriage is not proven by a ring on a table. It is proven by the life built around it, by the private language, by the memories no stranger can study, and by the quiet truth hidden inside the walls. So yes, a woman came to ruin my marriage in front of everyone. For a moment, her lie looked perfect. It had documents, tears, photographs, and a room full of people ready to believe it. But one question exposed what paper could not hide. She knew the story she was paid to tell. She knew the timing. She knew the fake name, the fake ring, and the fake pain. But she did not know the man. She did not know the marriage. And she did not know me. That was her mistake. Because I did not need to scream to protect what was mine. I only needed to remember the truth, stand beside my husband, and ask the one question her lie could not survive. The end. Commentary, lesson, and explanation. Before we call this story a revenge story, we need to pause and look at what really happened in that room. Because this was not only about a woman walking into a dinner with fake documents. This was about how fast a peaceful life can be attacked when someone understands your weakest public moment. Everly and Callum were not just attending a party. They were standing at the edge of a new chapter. 5 years of marriage, years of work, years of being judged, and one final night before Callum received the control his father wanted him to have. So when Brenna entered that room, she did not only interrupt a celebration, she attacked the timing, the trust, the marriage, the company, the family name, and Everly's place in that world. That is why the scene feels so heavy. The lie was not random. It was designed to hurt in every direction at once. Now imagine standing there as Everly. The room is beautiful. The lights are warm. People are dressed well. Everyone is smiling. Your husband is beside you. You are finally close to peace. And then suddenly, a stranger walks in and says, your marriage is fake, not private cheating, not a small secret. She says the whole foundation of your life is illegal, dishonest, and stolen. That kind of accusation does something to the body before the mind can even answer. Your heart races, your hands go cold, your brain starts searching for danger. And this is where the story becomes very human. Everly does not become powerful instantly. She almost breaks first. That is important. A strong character is not someone who never feels fear. A strong character is someone who feels fear, almost falls, and then finds one solid truth to stand on. Brenna's performance works because it is not messy. She does not walk in screaming. She walks in prepared. She has a folder. She has pictures. She has papers. She has a ring. She has tears placed exactly where they need to be, and that is a frightening lesson. A lie does not always look wild or foolish. Sometimes a lie enters the room with good posture, clean makeup, and official-looking documents. Sometimes it sounds calm. Sometimes it speaks like a victim. That is why the guests believe her so quickly. They are not evil people, but they are careless people. They see papers and assume truth. They see tears and assume pain. They see Callum shocked and assume guilt. And this is something we should think about deeply. Public judgment often moves faster than justice. Callum's position in that moment is painful because he is telling the truth, but the truth has no costume. He only has his voice. Brenna has documents. He says, I don't know her, but in a room hungry for scandal, a simple denial sounds weak. That happens in real life too. Sometimes the innocent person looks confused because they were not prepared for the lie. The liar looks confident because they rehearsed. That is why confidence is not always truth. Sometimes confidence is just practice. Callum is not calm because he is innocent and shocked. Brenna is calm because she knows the scene she came to perform. The room does not understand that difference at first. And then there is Leora. Leora is the kind of villain who does not need to raise her voice. She uses timing, reputation, and social pressure like weapons. Her cruelty is polished. She does not say, Everly, leave because I hate you. She says, perhaps you should step away before this becomes uglier. That line is dangerous because it sounds protective, but it is actually an attempt to remove Everly from power. Leora wants to control the room. She wants Everly emotional, silent, and outside the conversation. This is one of the sharpest parts of the story. Manipulative people often do not push you out with force. They guide you out with fake concern. They make you feel like leaving is your own decision, while they quietly take your place. But Everly does something that changes the whole scene. She stops looking at the crowd and looks at her husband. That moment matters more than the audience may realize. The crowd is loud. The papers are frightening. Leora is pressuring her. Brenna is performing pain. But Everly looks at Callum himself. She does not look at the scandal. She looks at the person she has lived beside for 5 years. And she sees fear, not guilt. That is the first real crack in the lie. Not a legal crack yet, but an emotional one. She remembers the life behind the marriage. The gas station coffee, the hard work, the restored houses, the quiet loyalty, and most importantly, the hidden sentence inside the wall. That memory becomes her anchor. The wall sentence is not just a sweet detail. It is the soul of the story. Leave it stronger than you found it. That line tells us who Callum is. He restores things. He does not use people and walk away. He does not build a life on cheap lies. And when he writes, Everly made me stronger, we understand that their marriage has a private language. This is what Brenna cannot fake. She can carry a ring, but she cannot carry 5 years of small memories. She can show a paper, but she cannot explain the sentence inside a wall. She can act like a wife, but she cannot answer like one. That is why Everly's question is so powerful. It does not fight drama with drama. It fights performance with lived truth. When Everly asks, what does Callum write inside the wall before the drywall closes? She is not just testing Brenna, she is testing the difference between appearance and reality. Brenna prepared the public version of Callum, his full name, his photos, his company status, his initials. But she does not know the private Callum. She does not know his father's habit. She does not know his injured wrist. She does not know the emotional meaning behind his work. And that is where the lie begins to die. A fake story can survive general questions. It cannot survive precise truth. That is a major lesson from this story. When someone is lying, do not always fight the whole lie at once. Ask for the detail only truth would know. The legal twist makes the story even stronger because it moves from emotion into evidence. The certificate uses Callum's current legal name, but the date belongs to a time before he officially changed that name. That mistake is brilliant because it shows the weakness of people who fake history. They know facts, but they do not understand sequence. They know names, but they do not understand timing. They know appearances, but not the life underneath. Then the hotel receipt fails. The hotel was closed, the ring fails. The initials are too formal, too cold, too connected to Leora's world. Each piece of fake evidence looked powerful alone, but once Everly slowed down and examined it, every piece started betraying the person who created it. This is where the story teaches something very practical. When your emotions are under attack, speed is your enemy. Leora's plan needed speed. She needed shock. She needed people reacting before thinking. She needed Everly to cry, Callum to panic, and the room to become uncertain before midnight. But Everly slows the moment down. She breathes, she asks, she reads, she remembers. She calls the attorney. She lets the facts line up. That is a powerful life lesson. Manipulation often needs confusion to survive. Calm attention is one of the best ways to destroy it. Brenna's confession also adds another layer. She is wrong, clearly wrong, but she is not the deepest source of evil in the story. She is a desperate woman who allowed herself to be used. That does not erase the harm she caused. She still walked into someone's anniversary dinner and tried to destroy a marriage. But the story shows that sometimes the person holding the knife is not the person who sharpened it. Brenna was paid, instructed, and pushed into a performance. The real danger was Leora, standing in the room with clean hands and a controlled face, hoping everyone would look at Brenna and never look behind her. That is how powerful manipulators operate. They use someone else's pain, someone else's need, someone else's fear, and turn it into a weapon. The investigation after the dinner is important because it proves Everly is not simply trying to win an argument. She wants the truth documented. She and Callum gather hotel records, courthouse details, the name change order, the wrong seal, and the payment trail. Then Nico appears with the emails, and suddenly the whole machine becomes visible. Appearance fee, document packet, successful delay, LP wants the room uncertain before the transfer. Those words reveal that this was not a spontaneous accusation, it was a plan, and the purpose was not justice, it was control. Leora wanted the trust transfer delayed so she could regain power and sell the lake property. She was willing to destroy Callum's marriage, Everly's dignity, and a charity's reputation to keep control in her hands. The boardroom scene is satisfying because Everly does not become cruel. She becomes clear. That is a different kind of victory. She does not throw insults. She does not beg people to believe her. She presents the sequence. First, the wrong name. Second, the wrong seal. Third, the impossible hotel receipt. Fourth, the wrong ring. Fifth, the emails. Sixth, the payment. Seventh, the lake property memo. Step by step, she removes every hiding place Leora had. This is what mature justice looks like. It is not always explosive. Sometimes it is organized. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it sounds like papers sliding across a table while the person who lied slowly runs out of air. Callum's line to Leora is one of the most meaningful moments. "You tried to turn a room against my wife." That sentence protects Everly publicly. Remember, Leora spent years making Everly feel like an outsider. So when Callum says that line in front of everyone, he is not only defending her from one lie, he is correcting 5 years of disrespect. He is saying, "She is my wife. She is not the problem. You are." That matters. In relationships, private love is important, but public loyalty also matters. If someone humiliates your partner in public, silent support is not enough. Callum finally speaks with full clarity, and that is part of the healing. The ending in the attic brings the story back from legal revenge to emotional truth. After all the documents, meetings, accusations, and power games, the final image is simple: an old wall, a hidden sentence, and handwriting from years ago. That is beautiful because the story began with fake proof placed on a public table, but it ends with real proof hidden inside a quiet house. The fake proof was made to impress strangers. The real proof was never meant to impress anyone. It was just true. That contrast is the heart of the story. Lies often perform for attention. Truth often lives quietly. So what can we learn from this story? We learn that trust should not be blind, but it should not be weak either. Everly does not ignore the accusation. She examines it. She asks questions. She follows evidence. But she also refuses to let a stranger's folder become bigger than 5 years of lived truth. We learn that public opinion can be dangerous when it moves too fast. We learn that people who crave control will often attack the strongest relationship in the room because unity threatens them. We learn that details matter. A wrong name, a wrong hand, a wrong hotel date, a wrong ring engraving. Small things can expose a huge lie. And we learn that calmness is not weakness. In this story, calmness is the weapon that wins. Most of all, this story asks us to think about the difference between image and reality. Leora had image, Brenna had performance. The room had opinions, but Everly had memory. Callum had character. Their marriage had a history no outsider could fully imitate. That is why the lie collapsed. Not because Everly screamed louder, but because she knew deeper. And sometimes in life, that is exactly how truth wins. It does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as one clear question, asked at the right moment, by someone who finally remembers what is real.